The night he almost gave up on love was the night the rain refused to stop. It fell hard against the windshield, blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and white, as if the world itself was crying. He sat alone in his car, hands resting on the steering wheel, heart heavy with a familiar ache. Love had never stayed. It always promised warmth and left him cold. He whispered to the silence, not knowing he was speaking to fate itself. Maybe my heart just wasn't meant to find anyone. His name was Arav, a man who looked confident from the outside, but carried quiet fractures within. Life had taught him to be strong early. He grew up watching promises break, watching people walk away when things became difficult. He learned how to survive, how to smile without believing it, how to love without expecting anything back. Music became his refuge. Late nights, headphones on, lyrics filling the spaces where hope used to live. He poured his emotions into melodies, even when no one was listening. She entered his life without warning, on an ordinary morning that should have meant nothing. Her name was Mira, and she stood behind him in a small cafe, nervously checking her phone while the barista struggled with the coffee machine. When Arav turned around, their eyes met for a second too long. It was not dramatic or cinematic. It was simple. But something shifted, like a quiet door opening in his chest. She smiled apologetically and said something about being late for work. He smiled back, surprised at how natural it felt. Mira was warmth disguised as calm. She had known loss too, but she carried it differently. Where Arav had built walls, Mira had learned to breathe through the pain. She believed in kindness, not as a weakness, but as a choice. Her past had left scars she did not hide. She had loved deeply once, and lost it when life demanded sacrifices she was not ready to make. Since then, she moved carefully, guarding her heart, but never closing it completely. Their connection grew slowly, like a song that reveals its meaning with every verse. Coffee turned into conversations. Conversations turned into late-night walks. Late-night walks turned into shared silences that felt safe instead of awkward. Arav found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He talked about his fears, his failures, his belief that love always ends in leaving. Mira listened without interrupting, without trying to fix him. She simply stayed. But love does not arrive without testing those who dare to believe in it. The first challenge came quietly, disguised as misunderstanding. Arav's past made him suspicious of happiness. When Mira grew distant for a few days because of family pressures and work stress, his mind filled in the worst possibilities. He pulled away instead of asking. She noticed the change immediately. The warmth between them cooled, replaced by silence heavy with unspoken words. When they finally talked, the truth came out painfully. Mira confessed that she felt punished for something she never did. Arav admitted that fear had once again controlled his reactions. It was their first real conflict, and it hurt more than either expected. For the first time, Mira questioned whether loving Arav meant constantly fighting his past. For the first time, Arav wondered if he was capable of loving someone without sabotaging it. They separated for a while, not because they wanted to, but because they needed clarity. Days without Mira felt longer than Arav imagined. The city seemed louder, emptier. Music no longer healed. It reminded him of her. He realized that love was not what had hurt him before. His fear was. Mira, on the other hand, struggled with her own doubts. She missed him, but she refused to beg someone to choose her. The second challenge arrived when life demanded decisions. Arav received an opportunity to work on a major music project in another city, a chance that could define his career. It was everything he had worked for, and yet it terrified him. Mira had finally stabilized her life where she was, caring for her family and building her own dreams. The distance threatened to undo what they had barely begun to repair. When Arav told her about the offer, he expected her to tell him to follow his dreams without hesitation. Instead, she told him the truth. She said she loved him, but she feared losing herself again in someone else's journey. The honesty stung, but it also grounded him. Love, he realized, was not about sacrifice alone. It was about balance. They argued not with anger, but with tears. They spoke about expectations, about fear, about the possibility that love might not be enough. For a moment, it seemed easier to walk away than to navigate the uncertainty together. That night, Arav stood on a rooftop, city lights stretching endlessly below, wondering if choosing his dream meant losing his heart forever. The turning point came not through grand gestures, but through quiet understanding. Arav chose to delay the project, not abandon it, but reshape it. He proposed working remotely, fighting for a version of his dream that did not require losing Mira. When he told her, she did not celebrate immediately. She asked him if he was sure if he would resent her later. He answered with clarity he had never felt before. He told her that for the first time, his heart knew where it belonged. Mira faced her own challenge next. Letting someone love her fully meant risking pain again. Trusting Arav meant believing that people could grow, that fear did not have to define the future. She chose to stay, not because it was safe, but because it was real. Their journey was not magically perfect after that. They still argued, they still struggled. Arav still battled moments of insecurity. Mira still feared abandonment. But they learned how to communicate, how to pause instead of running, how to choose each other even when it was hard. Love became a daily decision, not a fleeting emotion. The final challenge came when Arav's past returned unexpectedly. Someone he once loved reached out, reopening old wounds and unresolved feelings. Mira did not accuse or demand. She simply asked for honesty. Arav, standing at the crossroads of who he was and who he was becoming, chose transparency. He chose the present over the past. That choice healed something deep within him. The night Arav released his first official music video, he stood beside Mira, hands intertwined. The song was about waiting, about pain, about hope, surviving every disappointment. It was called Until My Heart Found You. As the final note played, Arav realized the truth behind the words. Love had not arrived to save him. It arrived to teach him how to stand without fear. Mira looked at him with eyes full of quiet pride. She had not fixed him. She had walked with him while he fixed himself. And in doing so, she had healed parts of herself too. The rain returned that night, softer this time, gentle against the windows. Arav smiled, remembering the man he was on that lonely evening months ago. He finally understood that love does not come when you are ready. It comes when you are willing to grow. Their story was not about perfection. It was about patience. Not about destiny, but about choice. And as they stood together, hearts steady and unafraid, Arav knew one thing with certainty. Every heartbreak, every doubt, every lonely night had led him here. Until his heart found her, he had been searching in the dark. Now, he finally knew what it meant to be home. Morning arrived quietly, but peace did not. Arav woke up with a strange heaviness in his chest, the kind that comes when happiness feels too fragile to trust. Mira slept beside him, her face calm, unaware of the storm forming in his thoughts. He watched her for a long moment, afraid that if he looked away, this life might disappear like a dream. Love had found him, yes, but staying in love was a different battle altogether. As days passed, life began to demand more than emotions. Arav's music started gaining attention, and with it came pressure. Deadlines, expectations, constant messages from producers who wanted more, faster, better. The same industry that once ignored him now pulled at him from every direction. He smiled through it all, but inside the weight grew heavier. Music was his dream, but it was slowly becoming a source of fear. Fear of failure. Fear of losing Mira in the process. Mira noticed the change before he said a word. He was present but distant, listening but not hearing. Conversations ended sooner, laughter softened. She had seen this before in her past, the slow, emotional withdrawal that often came before goodbye. Instead of accusing him, she chose patience. She reminded herself that love was not proven in easy moments, but in how two people handled pressure together. The real challenge arrived when Arav began doubting himself. One night, after a long recording session that went badly, he returned home frustrated and silent. Mira tried to comfort him, but her words felt distant to him, like echoes he could not reach. In his exhaustion, he said things he did not mean. He said maybe love was distracting him. Maybe he was losing focus. Maybe he needed space. The words hit Mira harder than any shout could have. She stayed quiet, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had too much. That night, she slept facing the other side of the bed, holding back tears she refused to let fall in front of him. Love, she realized, was once again asking her how much she was willing to endure. Days of emotional distance followed. Arav buried himself in work, believing productivity would silence his doubts. Mira focused on her own responsibilities, trying to protect her heart without closing it. They existed in the same space but felt miles apart. The silence between them grew louder than any argument. The breaking point came unexpectedly. Mira received news that her mother's health had worsened. Fear gripped her, and instinctively she reached for Arav. But he was unavailable, stuck in meetings, lost in his own chaos. That night, Mira sat alone in a hospital corridor, realizing how alone love could feel when support was missing. For the first time, she questioned whether being strong together meant sometimes being invisible. When Arav finally arrived, guilt was written all over his face. Seeing Mira exhausted, eyes swollen from crying, something inside him cracked. All the pressure, all the ambition, all the fear collapsed into one painful truth. He had been so afraid of losing himself that he had almost lost the person who mattered most. They talked honestly that night, not as lovers trying to win an argument, but as two wounded people trying to understand each other. Arav admitted that success scared him more than failure. He feared becoming someone unrecognizable, someone who chose achievement over connection. Mira admitted that she feared becoming secondary again, someone who was loved only when convenient. The resolution did not come instantly. It came through listening, through apology without excuses, through tears that finally fell freely. They promised each other something simple but powerful. No matter how loud the world became, they would not let silence grow between them again. From that moment, love changed shape. It became steadier, deeper, more intentional. Arav learned that ambition did not require emotional distance. Mira learned that asking for support was not weakness. They began scheduling time for each other like it was as important as any meeting or responsibility. Love was no longer assumed. It was practiced. Chapter 2 of their story was not about romance alone. It was about choosing presence over pride, understanding over assumption, and partnership over isolation. They realized that finding love was only the beginning. Protecting it, nurturing it, and growing within it was the real journey. And as Mira sat beside Arav one evening, listening to him play a new melody inspired by pain and healing, she smiled softly. Love had been tested again, and this time it had not broken. It had grown stronger, wiser, and more real than ever before.